we said if you can look at a diffraction pattern, and by looking at the symmetry in the diffraction pattern, you can get to know what possibly is the crystal structure. And if you want to confirm that crystal structure, you can tilt your sample to some other angles, get the diffraction patterns coming from some other planes, and by knowing the symmetries of those planes, I will be able to know. If I take a cubic crystal and I get a pattern which is a four-fold pattern, I know that how much if I rotate, I come to different other planes. Because the angles between that 100 plane are, what is the top plane? Let's say 001 plane for me. So the angle between 001 plane and some other planes is always can be calculated, and we know this. And once I know this information, if I can rotate exactly by that angle, my sample, tilt my sample by that angle, and I will be able to come to that pattern and confirm, yes, if this was not cubic, I would not have got this pattern with this symmetry. But this is all only information to give you information on what crystal structure it is. As we said in XRD also, our goal is not only to find out what crystal structure it is, but also to find out lattice parameters. So for that I need to do some calculations. How do I do these calculations is the question. So for example, if I have a pattern like this, I always take this, which is easier, and this is a four-fold diffraction pattern, let's say, with a transmitted beam. Usually the transmitted beam will be a very intense beam, and the diffracted beams, depending on which diffracted plane they are coming from, they have different intensities. And now can I find out what these planes are? That is first question. Okay, and the next question is, can I find out if I know what plane it is, can I find out its deep what is called displacing, is the next question. So first question that we need to address is, do I know what planes these are? That can be easily found out by looking at the symmetry of the pattern. If I see a four-fold symmetry like this, definitely that means the planes that are giving diffraction are the ones which are coming from those planes which have a four-fold symmetry. As a result, then if this particular beam is perpendicular to one of the what is called four-fold planes, and what are the four-fold planes? The planes which have four-fold symmetry are either 100 or 010 or 001. That's it. Nothing else in a cubic. No other plane can give me a four-fold symmetry other than these three. Right? So that means this particular beam, which is perpendicular to this board and perpendicular to this diffraction pattern, which is what I call it as a transmitted beam, is perpendicular to one of these three planes. And because that spot I am calling it as a normal to that plane, all these spots for me are nothing but vectors. Okay? So if I treat them as vectors coming from various planes, I can treat them as plane normals. If I am doing that, then I can call this as, let's say, 100. You may say, sir, why 100? You can also call it as 001. You can call anything else also. But just for the sake of understanding, I am putting one of them. And if this is 100 and this and this, these two spots are at equal distances, okay, and at 90 degrees with respect to this. And if this is this and these two are also 90 degrees. So if I look at this angle is 90 degrees. And that clearly tells you that these two spots have to be also those spots which are at 90 degrees and at equal distance, and those are nothing but the 010 and 001. So those are coming from planes which have 90 degree angle with my beam, and we call that as the beam direction is what is called the zone axis. And all these planes which are there, all these diffraction spots that I am seeing in the diffraction pattern are all coming from various planes which follow a rule called law tells that the dot product between the zone axis and the planes should be equal to, have you ever heard of this zone law? It should be equal to 0. So if I have this direction, which is, as I call it as UVW, and my plane, which is HKL, this should be 0. That means what? If I imagine that there is an axis and there are so many planes and all of them are the ones which are giving diffraction pattern, and this axis is contained in all these planes, whatever planes are there, then automatically the plane normals of all of them are also normals to this axis, right? Because this axis is contained in those planes. So every plane normal of those planes are also perpendicular to this this axis, which I am calling it as a zone axis, and when they are perpendicular, then the dot product is 0, right? Whenever there are two vectors which are perpendicular to each other, the dot product is 0. And this particular condition is what we use, and from that we can find out what these are. And once I know that these two are 0, 1, 0, for example, if I take a dot product of this and this, is it 0? How do I get the dot product? Dot product is, if this is UVW and if this is HKL, okay, it is UH plus VK plus LW. This is the dot product, right? If you know a little bit of vector algebra, you will know this. And that is this multiplied by this multiplied by this multiplied by this. And you do this, you will see that this is 0. And similarly, you can see this, and this particular thing will be negative of this, because it's an inversion symmetry. And this you can call it as 0 bar 1 0, and this can be called as 0 0 bar 1. And what about this? This is a vector addition of these two, like a resultant of two vectors. And what will be that thing? 0 1 1. And can I say this and this again? Dot product is 0? No? Yes or no? 1 0 0 and 0 1 1. Is the dot product 0? It has to be 0. Otherwise it won't appear in the diffraction pattern at all. And you see this? 1 multiplied by 0, 0 multiplied by 1, 0 multiplied by 1. It is 0. And now if you take the inversion of this, this will be 0 bar 1 bar 1. And like that, I can easily index this pattern. This is what we call it as indexing the pattern. In X-ray diffraction also, once I know I get a pattern, I need to index the pattern. How do I index the pattern? If I know the crystal structure, I can index the pattern. Similarly here also, I know that this is showing a four-fold symmetry, and I have confirmed that this is a cubic, and then I am starting with indexing the pattern by using a rule called zone law. And similarly, in X-ray diffraction, once I know that this is FCC, I know the first peak of FCC must be 111. The second peak must be 200. What is the law that I am using? I am using the extinction condition, okay, which is there for each of the crystal structure. For FCC, there is a particular extinction condition which tells me that HKL should be unmixed. And the first peak should be always the lowest HKL. Why it should be lowest HKL? If you again use your lambda equal to 2d sin theta, okay, the first peak means the smallest theta, right? The smallest theta will always basically mean, in terms of d, is it the smallest d? It will be the largest d, right? So what is the largest d? Okay, so d depends on what? D is nothing but a by square root h square plus k square plus l square. If you want to have the largest d for a given lambda, if the theta is the smallest, d has to be largest. When will the d be largest? whenever this HKL is very small. Right? If the HKL is bigger number, then the D will be smaller. D will not be larger. So what is the largest that I can get? D. That will be with the smallest HKL. What is the smallest HKL which satisfies my condition of HKL should be unmixed? Is only 111. Right? 100 cannot happen, appear in FCC because 100 does not satisfy that condition. 110 does not satisfy that condition because 110, 2 odd and 1 even. 0 is considered as even, right? So as a result, that also does not. So what satisfies is only 111. That's why I can say that very safely, I can always say the first peak is always 111. But there are problems. Some cases, you may see that you have an FCC material, but the first peak, which is supposed to be 111 peak, does not appear in the diffraction pattern at all. But you see a 200 peak. Or it may so happen sometimes that the 111 peak is very small, but the 200 peak is very big. Can you guess and tell me when can this happen? There may be case where you may not see a 111 peak at all, though I know pretty well that this is one. That means at the position where I am expecting a 111 peak, no peak at all. Okay, because I can find out, knowing the lambda, knowing what material mine is. For example, if I know that it is aluminum, I know the lattice parameter of aluminum. I can calculate what should be the D for the 111 peak and put that D into this equation. Knowing the lambda, I can find out the theta. So I know at what theta 111 peak should appear in case of aluminum. But when I look at there, I may not see a peak there. But if I calculate what is the D spacing for 200, again using the same lattice parameter, again using the same lambda, I plug the D into this, I find a particular theta, and I do see a peak there. I am seeing a 200 peak, I am not seeing a 111 peak. What is the problem? The problem is that that particular alloy is possibly having a texture in it. Okay? Sometimes when you take metals and heavily deform them, that all the grains are oriented in a particular direction. And if that particular direction is such that if such a material is taken and then subjected to X-ray, it is behaving as if it's like a single crystal. Because all the grains are oriented in one direction. So as a result, it is not a random grains now anymore, but all grains are oriented in a particular direction and have developed what is called a texture. And if that texture is in the 200 plane, and if that rolling plane is, let's say, a 200 plane, then you will not see a 111. Or you may see some grains are still random. Not all of them got elongated, depending on what is the extent of your deformation that you have provided. And as a result, you may see the 111 peak smaller than even 200. Otherwise, usually the strongest peak in an FCC is always 111 and 200. And as you go to the other HKL planes, the intensities come down. So this is how we will be able to see these things. So as a result, in X-ray, we use that kind of a concept to find out what these peaks are. In here, we use this. So I know now by seeing the diffraction pattern, and as I was just talking to one of your professors, that we also have other ways. Like in X-ray diffraction, it is not always I find out the pattern by simply taking the ratios of sine square theta, which possibly you must have listened one of my the lectures earlier, that we find out whether it is BCC or FCC or lattice parameter calculations simply by doing the sine square theta ratios. Whereas nowadays people do not do all that. They have software where is it available, where in that software there is so much of a database for all the possible materials, for all possible phases, what is the diffraction pattern. For example, in an aluminum alloy, what are the phases that I can expect in an aluminum copper phase diagram? I know that it can form either pure aluminum or alpha aluminum. It can form Al2Cu. It can possibly form some other compound. So for all these compounds, people have made these compounds, did XRD, and found out what kind of a pattern that you get, and they have recorded all this in the form of certain database. So people simply get their diffraction pattern, compare it with that particular database, And the database will immediately tell you that this particular phase is Al2Cu and this particular phase is Cu3Al or something like that. So you don't need to really do all these calculations, and most of these are done nowadays by softwares, and one can also do refining these particular calculations by special techniques called Rietveld refinement and things like that. Similarly, in electron diffraction also, what people now do is there are softwares which will give you, if I can think, for example, if I know approximately what my material is, let's say I know my material is a steel with some, let us say niobium in it or vanadium in it or something like that. So that means, let me think of what are all the possible phases that I can expect. So if it is a niobium vanadium containing steel, then I may expect niobium carbide, vanadium carbide, right? I may also expect some iron carbide, which is Fe3C. I will also possibly say, because it is being done at room temperature, I will also have some alpha ferrite. So these are the expected phases. Now if I have, these are expected phases, I can generate diffraction patterns from each of this phase by giving the lattice parameters of those phases. If I know those lattice parameters and the crystal structure of those phases, I can generate diffraction patterns. And I get a diffraction pattern like this. I compare this diffraction pattern with those generated diffraction patterns. And from that, get an idea of what, the moment this pattern matches with one of the generated patterns, immediately I know what are the HKLs. Because in the generated diffraction pattern, it clearly tells you that this part is this HKL, this part is this HKL. Because that generation of the diffraction pattern is based on a software which has all the crystallography embedded into it. It knows what are the angles between various planes, all those information is there. And for various crystal structures, what are these angles? They are also there. So once I know that it is orthorhombic, once I tell that my beam, what we call it as zone axis, what I need to simply give to that software is what is the crystal structure, what are the lattice parameter, what is my beam direction, which is called zone axis. If I give these three informations, and immediately it generates a pattern. And from in that pattern, it immediately tells you if this is the zone axis, what are all the diffraction parts that are coming, what are the HKLs of all of them. So like that we can be able to compare. And then once I know that, can I find out now what are the next step, which is called the lattice parameters. So to find out that, we need to do some calculation. And that calculation is based on, again, one fundamental principle, which is nothing but the Bragg's law. As I told you, we have a beam which is going through the sample like this and getting diffracted like this. And it is giving me a diffraction pattern, something like this. Again, I will use the same diffraction pattern. And I have already said that this is, let's say 100, this is 010. Now this distance that I have from the transmitted spot to the diffracted spot, can I know something about this distance? Is this related to something? What is it related to? To understand this, you need to look at this. How this diffraction is taking place. In this, you know this is 2 theta. Okay? So if this is 2 theta, I know, and this distance is what we are talking about, that distance. Okay? I will not call it as d, which to confuse you from interplanar distance. I will simply call it as some x. And people usually use the term called r. Whatever it is, you can use any number. Okay, if this is my r, right, this is transmitted beam, this is diffracted beam. I am only considering one of the diffracted beams. There are so many such diffracted beams. So this is the r corresponding to this particular HKL plane. Whatever is that HKL plane. So this r and this, are they related? So for example, if I say sine 2 theta, if I take it, sine 2 theta can be written as what? Okay, can somebody tell me? Sine 2 theta is r by this. If this is, I call it as h. What is the h? H is the distance between my sample and this imaging plate, if I can call that. Right? And if the theta is very small, And instead of sin theta, if I call it as tan 2 theta, I mean not, sorry, it is not h, a, r by h, r by whatever is this, some number. Okay, instead of doing that, because the things that I easily know is this, I know this. So that's why I will not consider sin theta, I will consider, let's say, tan theta. Okay, tan 2 theta is r by h, definitely, right? Can I say that? And now when the theta is very small, people always can say, equate this to simply as 2 theta. Why theta is very small? I just now told you some time back that lambda is very small in electron microscopy, so theta is very small. So if the theta is very small, I can say this. And now if I go back to my what is called X-ray diffraction and say lambda equal to 2d sin theta. And there also now theta in electron microscope, electron diffraction is very small. So I can simply call it as 2d theta. Of course, these are all approximations, please remember. Okay, with these approximations, I can say that the d is, or in other words, 2 theta is what? Lambda by d. So that means here I can write this as lambda by d, because this is also 2 theta. So 2 theta is r by h, which is also equal to lambda by d from Bragg's law. So that means I can say that I can use this particular thing and we call it as Rd equal to h lambda, or people also call this as L. People call this as camera length. The distance between the sample and the image is called camera length. Okay, and so Rd equal to L lambda is a very, very profound equation which is used in all electron diffractions. And in a particular machine of TEM, whether it is a 200 kV or 100 kV, lambda is known to us. And L also can be found out. These are all fixed for a given particular machine. So this is what is called camera constant, because this is a constant value for a given machine. For a given lambda, for a given machine, lambda is fixed. So once I know L lambda is fixed, I know that R and D are inversely proportional. What is D? D is the interplanar distance. What is R? R is the distance between the diffracted spot and the transmitted spot. So that means R is inversely proportional to D. So that means if I simply measure this R, I am measuring the D. By knowing the camera constant, I can actually find out the D for every spot. Every spot is every one HKL plane. So that means I am able to find out the D for every HKL plane. If I find out D, what will I get? From D, what can I calculate? Yes? I can calculate lattice parameter, because I know lattice parameter and D are related to each other by this formula. So if I can find out the D for each of them, for example, this one, if I measure this R and then use this formula and find out the D, and from the D, I have now known D of 0, 1, 0. And if I know D of 0, 1, 0, I plug the D into this and put 0, 1, 0 into this and find out the A. And if I want to confirm this further, what I do is I also measure this distance. And I know that this is 0, 1, 1. Right? I have already indexed it, because this step of calculating comes only after my indexing the diffraction pattern. I have already finished indexing the diffraction pattern. I know each spot what it is, what is the HKL of that. Once I already know what is the HKL of each spot, I just simply need to measure the distances between the transmitted spot and the diffracted spot. And once I measure all that R, measure this R, calculate from that R what is the D using this formula. And from that formula, once I know the D, again plug that D into this equation. I know that this is 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, and again calculate A and see whether that A and this A are the same. If it is coming from the same crystal, all these diffraction spots, then the A should be the same. So this is how I will be able to find out A. And I can check that. And my accuracy of this A depends on what? My accuracy of A depends on this. How accurate my L lambda is, and how accurately I have measured this R. This R I am physically measuring, right? So if my accuracy there is at the third decimal, then I may be able to get a third decimal accuracy, let's say, in A, otherwise I will not. And that is where I was telling you the precision lattice parameter calculations which we talk about in X-ray diffraction are not so easy in this, because the lambda that I am using, though I say 100 kV microscope and there is one lambda, most of the time the lambda that falls on the sample is not really monochromatic. It has some range. And as a result, when there is a range here, obviously this calculation will have a problem. Okay? So as a result, you have some inaccuracies. Of course, that is where aberration corrections are coming into picture. People are, and similarly this spot is may not be a spot, but it may be a diffuse spot. And for me to really exactly find out what is the distance called R may be difficult when there is other aberrations inside the material, inside the microscope. So you need to correct all these aberrations to be able to get as accurately as possible these values, and then what you measure is correct. So this is one aspect which everybody has to remember when we are talking of electron diffraction, but we can actually do all this. So you can see that we can use this, and this particular thing is what people started calling them as what is called a reciprocal lattice. Why we use this term reciprocal lattice is because the diffraction pattern looks like a 2D periodic lattice, right? You know, there is a periodicity here, as if these are all atoms arranged periodically in 2 dimensions. They are all diffraction spots, but there is a periodicity in this. There is a symmetry in this. Like a symmetry inside a lattice, there is a symmetry inside this. And as a result, I can treat this whole diffraction pattern as a lattice. But what is the relation between this lattice and the actual real lattice from which this diffraction pattern is coming? That relation is a reciprocal relation, because all distances here are inversely proportional to the d spacings, right? Because R is inversely proportional to d. As a result, if the d is larger, R will be smaller. If the d is smaller, R will be larger. For example, if you simply look at this as 0, 1, 0, and the next one is what? In the same direction. The next one in the same direction at the same equal distance will be 0, 2, 0. Right? Usually in my actual d spacing calculations, d of 0, 1, 0 is A. Because A by square root a square plus k square plus l square, if I put it, I will get it as A. Whereas d of 0, 2, 0 is what? A by 2. So the d is actually half of that, but R is double of that. If I measure the R of 0 to 0, R of 0 to 0 is the double of R of 0, 1, 0. So whereas the d of 0 to 0 is half of the d of 0, 1, 0. So you can see a reciprocal relation between R and d. And obviously if there is a reciprocal relation between R and d, there is also a reciprocal relation between R and A, because d and A are connected to each other. So as a result, I can call this particular lattice as a reciprocal lattice, and people treat this as a lattice with certain what are called, like a real lattice has X, Y, Z, A, B, C, alpha, beta, gamma. Similarly, people also treat this as a unit cell with certain distances, and people call them, if you have A, B, C in a normal lattice, people use these terms called A star, B star, C star, and find out relations between these to be able to see whether this particular reciprocal lattice can be related to the real lattice. and one can do a lot of calculations to find out whether reciprocal lattice can be used as a representation of the real lattice. But this is, one has to remember that the reciprocal lattice is only a virtual lattice. It is not a real lattice, because it is only coming because of the diffraction from a real lattice. But mathematically, to understand the whole crystal structures, the reciprocal lattice will be of great use, and that's the reason why people use this reciprocal lattice. And there are relations between a reciprocal lattice and a real lattice. For example, if you take a, for example, a BCC structure. In a BCC structure, what are the planes that give you diffraction? Can somebody tell me? 110, correct? And what is the next one? You have not gone through still X-ray diffraction. The next one is 200. The next one is 211. Right? So now if I take a diffraction pattern, the diffraction pattern, if I start a diffraction pattern and start putting these parts, like this, 110 is something here. If this is 1, this is 1. If I call this as 0, 1, 0, and this, if I call this as 1, 0, 0, and if this is 0, 0, 1, let's say. So this is 1, 1, 0. So in a diffraction pattern, you may not see this and this parts. They may be actually not there at all, but you will see this part, because that is satisfying the extinction condition for that. Similarly, you may not see this part, but you will see this part. Similarly, you will see this part, which is 110, 220. Right? And what is this part? Can somebody tell me? This is 200. I mean 0, 0 to 0. If this is 0 to 0, because this is 0, 1, 0, this is 0 to 0. And this is 1, 1, 0, this is 2 to 0. Then what is this? This is nothing but a vector summation of this vector and this vector. Right? What is that vector summation? If I take this vector is 0 to 0, this vector is 1, 0, 0, then what is this vector? 1, 1 to 0, as simple as that. 1 to 0, is there a plane that gives you diffraction in BCC? No. So you will not see this spot at all in the diffraction pattern. Now if I look at only those spots which appear in the diffraction pattern, and those spots are this, for example, this, and this, and this, and if I continue, I will have one here, I will have one here, I will have one here. This is the transmitted thing. I will have one here, I will have one here. Right? If I look at this carefully, and if I do this in 3D, okay, if I look at all the diffraction spots, remove all those which do not form diffraction. Can I now index all of them? I know that this is 110. This is does not exist. Forget it. Okay, this also does not exist. And this is what will be this? This is 200. Right? And what is this? What is this? 0, 0, 2 bar 0. Correct. And then can somebody tell me this? 2 bar 0, 0. Perfect. Then similarly, can we tell what is this? It is this and this. I am going 1 and 1. So it will be 1, 1, 1, 0. 1, 1 bar, 1 bar, 1 bar, 0, 1. Are you sure? No. What is this vector? This is 1, 0, 0 vector, and this vector is 0 bar 1 0 vector. Summation of this is 1 bar 1 0 vector. Because if this is 0 0 1 0 direction, this is 0 bar 1 0 direction. This is a negative of that, whereas this is positive. So you will see this is bar 0 bar 1 0, and this will be 2 bar 2 0. Like that, I can find out this whole diffraction pattern, and if I do it in 3D, it exactly looks like actually what kind of a structure. If I imagine that 3D as a unit cell, this 3D, this is only one plane I am doing. I am extending it into 3D. This is only my x-axis and y-axis, let's say. What about this? If I look at this, imagine a unit cell. What will be that unit cell? Can somebody tell me? What kind of a unit cell it is? First of all, is it a cubic unit cell? It is cubic. And what cubic is that? Huh? It will be an FCC unit cell. Okay? It will look like an FCC unit cell because all these will be like a face-centered positions. So these are all, these four will look like a body corners, and this will be a face-centered position. So if I extend it, I will have another face coming here, that will also have another face center, another face coming here, and another face coming here. So if I do this in a 3D, unfortunately, it will be a little difficult for me to draw it, but one can visualize that. So what I am trying to say is a real unit cell, which is a BCC unit cell, if it is seen in a reciprocal lattice, it will be a FCC unit cell. So the reciprocal lattice of a BCC lattice is a FCC. And similarly, you can also prove it very easily that the reciprocal lattice of a FCC lattice is a BCC. If the real lattice is FCC, then the reciprocal lattice will be BCC. And one can prove this very easily. And if you can draw like that. So this is how we can actually use reciprocal lattice to understand what is the relation between a real lattice and a reciprocal lattice. And there is a lot of mathematics involved in it. At your level, possibly, I don't think I want to go into that, but one can do a lot of mathematical analysis of this. So, but it is important that we understand that the concept of reciprocal lattice and where it is useful to understand this particular thing. So, I think with this, we will stop with this electron diffraction, excepting that one point that I thought I should emphasize, which is about order disorder. In an order disordered case, I mentioned to you sometime back when we were talking of X-ray, that whenever you take an ordered structure, when I say ordered, chemically ordered only I am talking about. I am not talking about structurally ordered. I am assuming they are already structurally ordered. That means they have a unit cell. Now inside this unit cell, I have more than one atom, and these two atoms or more than these two atoms are taking specific positions inside the lattice. The example we can take is, let us say, Ni3Al, okay, which has FCC type of unit cell. I can also take a copper zinc beta brass, which is like a BCC unit type of a unit cell. For example, in a copper zinc, if all copper atoms are, let us say, occupying this, and the zinc atom will sit here. Because in a BCC, you have how many lattice points per unit cell? 2. Right? So here, copper zinc, there are two atoms. One will take the body corners, another will take the body center. And if I look at all the unit cells inside the material, if every body center is occupied by only zinc atom, and if all the body corners are occupied by only copper atoms, then I call it as a ordered structure. Okay? Then I call it as a structure, chemically ordered structure, and these are called ordered compounds. And now the question is, if I take such an ordered compound and do what is called a diffraction analysis using X-ray diffraction, I see that a normal BCC will give me peaks which are 110, 200, 211, 220. This is a standard BCC pattern. If it is not ordered, for example, if I take the same copper zinc and go beyond 455 degrees centigrade, this beta brass becomes disordered. And if I am below 455, I call this as actually beta prime or beta dash, some people call it, which is an ordered. So below 455 it is ordered, which is called beta dash, and above 455 it is disordered, which is beta. What is the difference between these two? Once it becomes disordered, copper can go and sit anywhere. It is not that copper will sit only at the corners. Some unit cell copper may be sitting in the corner, some other unit cell copper may be going and sitting in the body center. So, and the probability of finding the copper atom, if this is copper and if this is zinc, the probability of finding a copper atom in a disordered structure is 0.5 at every position. If I define two positions, 0, 0, 0 and half, 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 these are the two positions inside the unit cell. The probability of finding copper at 0, 0, 0 and the probability of finding copper at half, half, half is always equal to 0.5 in a disordered structure, because the total amount of copper inside the material is 50%, because it is CuZn, Cu 50, zinc 50, right? So the probability of it. But the moment it becomes ordered, then I know the copper goes only and sits at the 0, 0, 0 position. Then the probability of finding, if I write probability of finding copper at 0, 0, 0 may be 1 if all copper is going and sitting there, and the probability of finding copper at half, half, half will be 0. That means you will not find any copper sitting at the half, half, half positions. This is what we call it as an ordered. And in fact, one can use this kind of arguments from to even calculate what is called order parameter, and we have also talked about how to calculate order parameter talking of X-ray diffraction. The reason why I want to bring this point here is the moment it is becomes ordered, you get an extra peaks. For example, 110 is the one which you get in a normal BCC. The moment it becomes ordered, you will get another peak which is called 100. Normally in a BCC you won't see 100. You will also see another peak between these two, which is called 111. If I look at the how the h square plus k square plus l square is increasing, you see for this h square plus k square plus l square is 1. For this it is 2. For this it is 3. For this it is 4. For this it is 6. Right? So originally these two peaks were not there in a disordered material. But the moment it becomes ordered, you see these two peaks. And the intensity of these two peaks comes from a parameter called structure factor. Structure factor for an ordered material, ordered copper zinc, is given by F of copper minus F of zinc. What is this small f? Anybody knows? It is called atomic scattering factor. In one of our previous classes we talked about it. It is called atomic scattering factor, which is very close to the atomic number. Whereas the structure factor of, instead of writing the structure factor for ordered, I will call it as structure factor for fundamental reflections. What are the fundamental reflections? The 110, 200, 211, these are all fundamental reflections. The structure factor for superlattice reflections, what are the superlattice? 100, 111, which are all not supposed to be there in a normal BCC. Why? Because if you add all of them, I am not getting, what is the condition for BCC? The summation should be even. The summation for 100 is not even. Summation for 111 is not even. But I still get them. And that comes only if it is ordered. Otherwise you will not get that. And this particular summation, this particular peaks, if I look at their structure factor is f of copper. This is for fundamental is plus. For the what is called the superlattice, it is minus. Okay. So now the problem that comes is that if this is the case, because I just now said that the intensity of the peaks is always square of the structure factor. If I look at the intensity of a superlattice reflection divided by the intensity of the fundamental reflection, in this particular case, it is always f of copper minus f of zinc divided by f of copper plus f of zinc whole square. Right? Because the intensity means the height of this peak and the area of this peak. The intensity of any peak, of a superlattice peak, what is the superlattice? Let's say this, I am considering this peak. The intensity of this peak divided by the intensity of this peak. This ratio is given by the structure factor square of the superlattice peak divided by the structure factor square of the fundamental peak, because intensity is square of the structure factor. If this is the case, now you can see the here the copper and zinc atomic numbers are how much? Anybody knows? What is the atomic number of copper and zinc? Which is 29? Copper. Zinc is 30. So if I take the difference is 1. Of course, minus 1 actually. But because I am taking squares, it does not matter to me. 1 divided by 59 square. That means if my fundamental peak is something like 3600 intensity counts per second, intensity is measured as counts per second, my superlattice peak will have 1. If this is the intensity kind of difference that we see. It's almost like 1 by 3600. My superlattice peak, if it is so big, my fundamental peak will be so small. That is the reason why in a normal X-ray diffraction, I will not be able to detect the difference between an ordered copper zinc beta brass and a disordered copper zinc beta brass. If somebody gives me 2 pieces, one he says this is an ordered beta brass, this is a disordered beta brass, please try to find out that this is ordered, this is disordered. Using X-ray diffraction, you will not be able to detect, because both of them will give you similar pattern, and the ordered sample also does not show you peaks which are bigger, because the peaks will be very small with respect to this. That is the reason why electron diffraction is very useful in this kind of case. And why electron diffraction is useful is because the electron beam that I am using is having a very high intensity. I am using either a 100 kV machine or a 200 kV machine. So my beam, incident beam, has a very large intensity. If my incident beam has a large intensity, my diffracted beams also will have a large intensity. In X-ray, we use a kV of approximately 20 kV. Okay? So X-ray machines operate at very low intensities, low voltages, whereas electron microscopes work with high intensity. Because the incident beam has a very high intensity, the diffracted beam also will have a very high intensity. As a result, I will be able to see in a pattern which is like this. I will suddenly, for example, this is 200. I will also see 100. Usually I am not supposed to see 100 if it is a BCC material, but I will see a 100, but may not be of the same intensity. If this is such a big spot, I will see it as a small spot, but I will be able to see that. Why I am able to see that? Because my incident beam has such a high intensity, the superlattice reflection will still have reasonable intensity for me able to see. So I am able to detect superlattice reflections in an electron diffraction, but I cannot detect superlattice reflections in a X-ray diffraction. But this problem will not come if my material is, let us say, not copper zinc but something else. Let's say NiAl. NiAl is also a compound which also has the same structure as that of beta brass. We call it as a ordered structure based on BCC. Ordered BCC. People call it as B2 structure. Let me not bother you too much about these terminologies, but it is ordered. That means in what? In this structure, nickel atoms will occupy, let us say, all the body corners. Aluminum will sit at the body centers. Now if I use the same formula, the intensity of the superlattice reflection is here, instead of copper zinc, I simply have to replace nickel and aluminum. This is nickel, aluminum. Nickel, aluminum. Now tell me, nickel atomic number and aluminum atomic number, do we know? What is nickel? 20, 21, 28. And aluminum? 13. So you can see this. Here it is 28 minus 13, that means 15 divided by 28 plus 13, 41. So this is the one. Now can you see the difference? You can see that this ratio is not as small as this fellow. You see this versus this. Both are ordered structures based on BCC, but one of them has the two atoms which have very similar atomic numbers. So X-ray diffraction cannot be used to find out superlattice structures or ordered structures where if the atoms present inside the alloy have similar atomic numbers. Whereas if the atoms present in the alloy have significant difference in the atomic numbers, you can detect, because the superlattice reflection will have reasonable intensity with respect to this. So X-ray diffraction has that limitation that you will not be able to see copper zinc as an ordered structure, but you can see NiAl as an ordered structure, whereas TEM you are not bothered about that limitation at all. You can see both of them. Okay, I think with this we will stop and go to the next class for the other electron microscopy techniques.